I am Clara Morton, 52 years old, and my husband threw me out of my own home like a bag of expired trash. Before I tell you how I ended up owning the very ground he walked on, tell me in the comments where you are watching from today. I love seeing how far our stories travel. It started with a sound I will never forget. Thud. Thud. Thump. It was the sound of my vintage Samsonite suitcase, the one I'd used on our honeymoon 25 years ago, tumbling down the hardwood stairs. It landed at my feet with a pathetic crash, one of the latches popping open to reveal a mess of hastily packed sweaters and underwear. I stood in the foyer of the house I had decorated, the house I had cleaned, the house I had turned into a home, and I couldn't breathe. My hands were trembling so hard I had to clasp them together against my chest. "Pick it up, Clara," Richard said. His voice wasn't angry. That was the worst part. It was bored. Cold. Like he was talking to a telemarketer he wanted to get off the phone. He was standing at the top of the landing, looking down at me. He was wearing the Italian silk suit I had picked up from the dry cleaners just yesterday. He looked handsome, successful, and completely unrecognizable. This wasn't the man I married. This was a stranger with my husband's face. And he wasn't alone. Leslie walked out of the master bedroom. My bedroom. She was 28 years old, with hair the color of spun gold and a smile that looked like it had been sharpened on a whetstone. But that wasn't what made my stomach turn over. It was the dress. She was wearing my emerald green silk wrap dress. The one I had bought for my 50th birthday. The one Richard said made me look trying too hard. On her, it was loose, flowing, and she was holding a glass of my favorite Pinot Noir. "Richard, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "We can talk about this. You don't have to do this." "Where am I supposed to go?" Richard laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He walked down the stairs slowly, step by step, as if he were descending a throne. "That's not really my problem anymore, is it, Clara? I've been generous. I let you stay here for months while I figured things out with Leslie. But now? You're just in the way." "In the way?" I repeated, feeling the tears hot and stinging in my eyes. "I gave you 25 years, Richard. I gave up my career at the accounting firm so you could build Morton Developments. I nursed your mother when she was dying of cancer because you couldn't handle the smell of the hospital. I signed every loan paper you put in front of me because I trusted you." He stopped on the bottom step, towering over me. He leaned in close, and I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the faint, cloying scent of Leslie's perfume. "And that," he sneered, "is exactly why you're leaving with nothing. You were useful, Clara. A good little housewife. But look at you." He gestured vaguely at my comfortable jeans and cardigan, his face twisting in disgust. "You're old. You're tired. You're boring. I need someone who matches my status. Someone who shines." He looked up at Leslie, who raised her glass in a mocking toast. "Get out," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And don't try to use the credit cards. I canceled them an hour ago. The joint account is frozen pending the divorce litigation. My lawyers will be in touch." "You can't do that," I said, panic rising in my throat like bile. "That's illegal. Half of that money is mine." "Try to prove it," he challenged. "I have the best lawyers in the city." "You? You have a suitcase and—" He glanced at his watch. "About 30 seconds before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "Trespassing? In my own home?" I looked at him, searching for a shred of the man who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. The man who swore to love me until death did us part. But that man was dead. I bent down, my knees popping, and snapped the latch of my suitcase shut. I didn't look at Leslie. I didn't look at the crystal chandelier I had spent months saving for. I just grabbed the handle. It felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of my wasted life. "You're making a mistake, Richard," I said quietly. "The only mistake I made was not doing this 5 years ago," he replied, turning his back on me. "Leslie, darling, open a fresh bottle. This one tastes like cork." I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped out. The sky was gray, heavy with rain, mirroring the storm inside me. As the door clicked shut behind me, the finality of that sound echoing in my bones, the first drops of rain began to fall. I walked down the long driveway, the wheels of my suitcase clattering over the cobblestones. I reached into my purse to check my wallet. I opened it, hoping he was lying, hoping there was something left. $43. 3 tens, 2 fives, and 3 singles. That was it. That was the sum total of my existence. I stood on the sidewalk, the rain starting to soak through my cardigan, shivering not from the cold, but from the shock. I was Mrs. Richard Morton, wife of the real estate tycoon. And I was homeless. The rain didn't stop. It poured, washing away the illusion of my suburban safety. I dragged my suitcase for 6 blocks until I found a bus stop. I didn't call an Uber, I couldn't afford the surge pricing. I took the city bus, sitting in the back, hugging my purse to my chest, surrounded by people who looked as tired as I felt. I got off at the edge of town, where the neon signs buzzed with dead flies and the air smelled of exhaust and desperation. I checked into the Traveler's Rest, a motel that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the Nixon administration. The clerk behind the glass partition didn't even look up from his phone when I slid my ID and $30 across the counter. Room 12. No smoking. Checkout is at 11, he grunted, sliding a plastic keycard back to me. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner, a combination that made my empty stomach churn. The carpet was sticky. The bedspread had a cigarette burn right in the center, shaped like a tiny, black crater. I sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I think I was too dehydrated to cry. My mind was racing, replaying the last 25 years on a loop. Why didn't I see it? The late nights at the office. The business trips on weekends. The password changes on his phone. I had been so blind, so trusting. I had thought we were partners. I had thought we were building a legacy together. But I was just the scaffolding. And now that the building was finished, the scaffolding was being torn down and thrown away. My stomach growled, a loud, angry protest. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I looked at my remaining $13. I could buy a sandwich, but then what? What about tomorrow? What about next week? I needed to take stock. I pulled my suitcase onto the bed and opened it. I had packed in a panic while Richard shouted at me, so it was a random assortment of things. Some wool sweaters, a pair of jeans, my toiletry bag, and... My hand brushed against rough, heavy wool. I pulled it out. It was a man's coat. Charcoal gray, thick, with elbow patches that had been sewn and resewn. My dad's coat. I must have grabbed it from the back of the closet without thinking. I had kept it there since he passed away 17 years ago. I brought it to my face and inhaled. It still smelled like him, a mix of peppermint candies, machine grease, and rain. My dad, George Hartley. He was a building superintendent, a janitor, really. He spent his life fixing other people's leaky faucets, unclogging toilets, and shoveling snow. He never made more than minimum wage. He wore the same work boots for 10 years. "Oh, Dad," I whispered into the rough wool. I made such a mess of everything. He had never liked Richard. The first time I brought Richard home, my dad had shaken his hand, looked him in the eye, and later told me, "Clara, that man has eyes like a shark. He's always moving, always hungry. Be careful." I hadn't listened. I was young, and Richard was charming and ambitious. I thought Dad was just being protective. I thought he didn't understand business. I hugged the coat tighter, seeking comfort in the memory of the only man who had ever loved me without conditions. As I squeezed the fabric, I felt something stiff in the inner breast pocket. I frowned. I pulled the coat away and reached inside. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled out a yellowed, sealed envelope. On the front, in Dad's shaky, block handwriting, it said, "For my Clara. When the world gets hard." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had forgotten about this. He had given it to me a week before he died of a heart attack. I was so grief-stricken at the time, and then so busy playing the perfect wife for Richard, that I had shoved it into the coat pocket and let it fade from memory. I tore open the envelope. Inside, there was no cash. No savings bonds. Just a single, plastic card. It was a debit card from Westfield National Bank. It looked ancient. The black plastic was scratched, the numbers on the front were fading, and there was no smart chip. It was just a plain, magnetic stripe card. Behind it was a small note on lined notebook paper. "Clara, I know you think I didn't leave you much. I know you think I was just a janitor who couldn't give you the world. But I listened. I watched. And I saved. Keep this safe. Use it when you really need it. When you are free. Love, Dad." I turned the card over in my hands. It felt light, insignificant. Westfield National Bank? I didn't even know if that bank existed anymore. Dad lived paycheck to paycheck. We ate pasta 4 nights a week because meat was too expensive. What could be on this? $50? $100? Maybe enough for 2 more nights at this motel. Maybe enough for a bus ticket to my cousin's house in Ohio. I looked at the card, feeling a wave of fresh tears. It wasn't about the money. It was that he had tried. Even with nothing, he had tried to leave me something. Unlike Richard, who had everything and left me with nothing. I tucked the card under my pillow. I curled up on top of the covers, wrapped in my dad's coat, and finally, the exhaustion won. I slept, dreaming of sharks in expensive suits and the smell of peppermint. The next morning, the hunger woke me up before the sun did. My stomach felt like it was digesting itself. I used the motel's tiny bar of soap to wash my face, put on my least wrinkled blouse, and stared at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were puffy, and my hair, usually perfectly blown out, was pulled back in a severe bun. But I had a mission. I had Dad's card. I checked Google Maps on my phone. Thank God Richard hadn't cut off my phone service yet, probably because it was on a family plan with his brother. There was a branch of Westfield National Bank downtown, about 3 miles away. I didn't have money for a cab, and I needed to save my cash for food. So, I walked. I walked 3 miles in my flats, blisters forming on my heels. I walked past the boutiques where I used to shop, past the cafes where I used to have lunch with the other wives. I kept my head down, terrified someone would recognize me dragging my suitcase. When I reached the bank, I hesitated. It was an imposing building, old-school architecture with massive marble columns and heavy brass doors. It screamed money. It screamed you don't belong here. I smoothed down my shirt, took a deep breath, and pushed through the doors. The air conditioning hit me instantly, cool and crisp. The lobby was quiet, smelling of floor wax and money. Men in suits whispered into phones. A security guard near the door eyed my suitcase suspiciously. I walked up to the teller counter. The girl behind the glass was young, maybe 22. She was snapping gum and scrolling on her phone under the desk. Her name tag said Tiffany. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding raspy. I cleared my throat. I found this card. It belonged to my father. I wanted to check if the account is still active. Maybe close it out. I slid the old, scratched black card through the slot under the glass. Tiffany looked at it like I had handed her a dead fish. She picked it up with 2 fingers, her manicured nails clicking against the plastic. This thing is ancient, she scoffed. We don't even issue these anymore. Does it even have a magnetic strip that works? I don't know, I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Please. Just try. She rolled her eyes and sighed, a loud, dramatic exhale. She turned to her computer and swiped the card. Beep. Error. See, she said, tossing the card back at me. Unreadable. It's probably been closed for a decade. You're wasting my time. Please, I begged, desperation creeping into my voice. Can you type in the numbers manually? My father left this for me. There might be $50 on it. I really need to know. Ma'am, look at the line, she said, pointing to the empty space behind me where one man was standing. I can't, is there a problem here? A deep, gravelly voice interrupted us. I looked up to see an older man stepping out from a glass office behind the teller line. He was wearing a gray suit that fit him perfectly, silver hair combed back, and wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read Mr. Banks, branch manager. She's trying to use a card from the Stone Age, Mr. Banks, Tiffany said, smirking. I told her it's dead. Mr. Banks looked at me. His eyes were kind but tired. Then, his gaze dropped to the card sitting on the counter. He froze. It wasn't a subtle reaction. His entire body went rigid. His eyes widened behind his glasses, and the color drained from his face so fast I thought he was having a stroke. He reached out a trembling hand and picked up the card. He didn't look at the numbers. He looked at the back, at a small, almost invisible symbol embossed in the corner. He looked up at me, and his expression had changed from polite indifference to absolute terror. Tiffany, he barked, his voice cracking. Close your station. Now. What? But now, he shouted, startling everyone in the lobby. Put up the sign. Lock your drawer. He turned to the security guard. Frank. Lock the front doors. No one in, no one out. Flip the sign to closed. Mr. Banks, what is going on? I stammered, terrified. Had I done something wrong? Was the card stolen? Was I going to go to jail? Mr. Banks didn't answer me. He ran around the counter, coming out into the lobby. He approached me like I was made of fragile glass. Ma'am, he whispered, his hands shaking as he held the card. Mrs. Morton? Yes? I squeaked. Please. Come with me. Immediately. He ushered me toward his office, waving Frank the guard to stand by the door. He pulled the blinds down on the glass windows, plunging the office into semi-darkness. He gestured for me to sit in the leather chair. Mr. Banks, you're scaring me, I said, gripping the arms of the chair. I just wanted to see if there was enough money for a sandwich. If the account is empty, just tell me. He sat down behind his desk, took a deep breath, and wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He inserted the card into a special, stand-alone card reader on his desk, a machine that looked much older than the ones at the tellers. He typed in a sequence of codes. He waited. Mrs. Morton, he said, his voice trembling. Did your father ever tell you about the arrangement? Arrangement? My father was a janitor. He fixed toilets. Mr. Banks looked at me with a mixture of pity and awe. He turned his computer monitor around so I could see it. Your father was a janitor, yes. But he was also George Hartley. I know his name, I said, confused. Look at the balance, Clara. Please. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I saw a string of numbers. I blinked. I wiped my eyes and looked again. There was a 4. Then a 7. Then, a lot of zeros. $47 million. $47 million. The room spun. The floor tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling off the chair. That's a mistake, I whispered. That's a glitch. The computer is broken. It's not a mistake, Mr. Banks said softly. And it's not a glitch. It's the Hartley Trust. And as of yesterday, when the system flagged your change of address and marital status query, it's all yours. I sat there, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. $47 million. It was a number so big it didn't feel real. It felt like Monopoly money. How? I managed to choke out. He patched his boots with duct tape. We drove a rusted Ford Escort. He clipped coupons for canned soup. Mr. Banks took off his glasses and cleaned them, giving me a moment to breathe. Clara, 30 years ago, your father owned a plot of land. It was a junkyard, really. Just scrubland and old tires on the edge of the industrial district. He inherited it from a distant uncle nobody cared about. I nodded slowly. I vaguely remembered Dad going to the lot on weekends to clear brush. Well, Mr. Banks continued, about 20 years ago, a developer came into town. A big one. They wanted to build a massive commercial center. They bought up every property in that district. But they needed your father's lot. It was the keystone piece. Without it, the project failed. He sold it? I asked. He did. But not for cash. Mr. Banks smiled, a small, admiring smile. The developers offered him a lump sum. $500,000. A fortune back then. But your father, he was sharper than anyone gave him credit for. He researched the development. He saw the blueprints. He knew what they were building. So, what did he do? He refused the cash. Instead, he demanded a contract. He wanted a 5% ownership stake in the land lease, in perpetuity, for any structure built on that soil. Plus, 5% of all gross rental income generated by the property. 5%? I said. That doesn't sound like much. Mr. Banks chuckled. For a house? No. But Clara, do you know what was built on that land? I shook my head. The Skyline Tower complex. My blood ran cold. The Skyline Tower. The tallest building in the city. The gleaming glass needle that dominated the skyline. The center of commerce. And the headquarters of Morton Developments. Richard's headquarters. Wait, I said, my voice rising. Are you saying? I'm saying that for 20 years, every company in that tower, every luxury condo owner, every retail store, they've been paying rent. And 5% of that massive river of money has been quietly flowing into this account, compounding interest, protected by an ironclad trust. Why didn't he tell me? I cried, tears streaming down my face. Why did he live like that? Why did he let me struggle? Because of Richard, Mr. Banks said, his voice hardening. I looked up, startled. What? Your father came to me when he set up the trust. He told me, Mr. Banks, my daughter is in love with a shark. If I give her this money now, he will eat her alive. He will take it, spend it, and leave her with nothing. I sobbed aloud. It was true. God, it was so true. So he added a clause, Mr. Banks explained. The Freedom Clause. You could not access this money, or even know of its existence, until one of two things happened: you turned 50 years old while unmarried, or you produced a divorce certificate proving you were free of Richard Morton. I stared at the screen. Dad knew. All those years ago, he knew this day would come. He had lived in poverty, wearing that scratchy wool coat, fixing other people's messes, just to ensure that when my life fell apart, I would have a parachute made of gold. He wanted you to be safe, Mr. Banks said softly. He wanted you to have the power. And now, you do. I wiped my face with my sleeve. The sadness was still there, heavy and aching, but something else was rising underneath it. A heat. A strength. Mr. Banks, I said, sitting up straighter. Does my ex-husband know about this? No one knows, Mr. Banks said. Your father made sure the ownership was buried under layers of shell companies. To the world, the land is owned by Hartley Holdings. No one connects it to George the janitor. Hartley Holdings, I repeated. Yes. And there's one more thing, Clara. The ground lease. What about it? The original lease your father signed with the developers, it was for 20 years. It expires next month. I looked at him. My brain, the accountant's brain that had been dormant for 25 years, suddenly snapped back online. Expires? I asked. Meaning the landlord, that's you, has the right to renegotiate the terms. Or, cancel the lease and take back the land. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed a loaded gun after staring down the barrel of one for 25 years. Mr. Banks, I said. I need a lawyer. The meanest, smartest shark in the water. Mr. Banks made a call. 20 minutes later, a man walked into the office. He looked like he was carved out of granite. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Richard's car, and he carried a briefcase that looked like a weapon. Mrs. Morton, he said, shaking my hand. I'm Silas Patterson. Mr. Banks tells me we have a unique situation. Unique is one word for it, I said. We spent the next 3 hours in that office. Mr. Patterson went through the documents, his eyebrows climbing higher and higher with every page. He muttered, this is brilliant. Your father was a genius, Mrs. Morton. This contract? It's unbreakable. You own them. You own the ground beneath their feet. I don't want the money yet, I told them. I mean, transfer enough for me to live. I need an apartment. A safe place. Clothes. But I don't want Richard to know I have money. Not yet. Smart, Patterson nodded. If he knows you have assets, he'll stall the divorce. He'll try to claim this as marital property, even though the trust protects it. It's better if he thinks you're destitute. He thinks I'm a beggar, I said. He thinks I'm starving in a Motel 6. Good. Let him think that, Patterson said. We need to finalize the divorce. Get him to sign the papers giving up all claims to your future assets in exchange for, well, nothing. He'll sign it because he thinks you have nothing. He will, I confirmed. He's greedy, but he's also arrogant. He wants to cut ties so he can marry his mistress. Perfect. Patterson tapped the file. Now, about the Skyline Tower. Richard Morton's company occupies the top 4 floors, correct? Yes. The penthouse offices. And I did a quick check while I was coming over, Patterson said, pulling up a tablet. Morton Developments is currently in a liquidity crisis. He's leveraged everything to build a new resort in Cabo. He's cash poor. He told me to get out because he needed someone who shines, I said bitterly. He's doing it for the image. He needs new investors. Exactly. And do you know who holds the debt on his company loans? I shook my head. Westfield National Bank, Mr. Banks chimed in with a grin. We hold about 60% of his commercial debt. Patterson looked at me. Mrs. Morton, with the funds in your trust, you could technically purchase that debt from the bank. You could become his primary creditor. I looked from the lawyer to the banker. The pieces were falling into place. So, I said slowly. I own the land under his building. I can control the lease. And I can buy his debt. You can tighten the noose around his neck before he even knows there's a rope, Patterson said. Do it, I said. Buy the debt. But keep it under Hartley Holdings. I want him to sweat. I want him to wonder who this new, silent investor is. Consider it done, Patterson said. Now, let's get you out of that motel. I have a client who is renting out a condo in the arts district. Very private, high security. No doorman who talks to gossip columnists. Thank you, I said. I stood up, feeling steady for the first time in days. I have one question though. Yes? My sister. Judith. Patterson paused. What about her? She called me this morning, I said. She pretended to be worried. But she asked too many questions about Dad's will. About if I had found anything. She's fishing, Patterson warned. I know, I said. Richard sent her. She's always been jealous of me. She thinks Dad loved me more. If she finds out. She can't find out, Patterson said. You need to play the role, Clara. You need to be the broken, desperate ex-wife. I can do that, I said. I've been playing the role of the obedient wife for 25 years. I think I can handle one more performance. The new apartment was beautiful. It wasn't a mansion, but it was modern, clean, and safe. Most importantly, it was mine. I paid 6 months' rent up front under the name of the trust. I bought a new phone, a burner prepaid phone, and kept my old one active only to receive calls from the enemy. 2 days after the bank meeting, my old phone buzzed. It was Judith. I stared at the screen. My little sister. We used to play dolls together. We used to share secrets. But somewhere along the line, she had turned bitter. She hated that I married a rich man, even though she never saw how lonely I was. She hated that Dad entrusted me with his care in his final years. I took a deep breath, channeled my inner actress, and answered. Hello? I made my voice sound weak, shaky. Clara. Judith's voice was shrill. Oh my God, I've been so worried. Richard told me, well, he said you guys split up? Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at a motel, I lied. It's awful, Judith. I have no money. He canceled the cards. I haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Oh, that's terrible, Judith said. But I heard it. I heard the faint, tiny note of satisfaction in her voice. Did you check Dad's old things? Maybe there was some cash stashed away? You know how he was. There it was. The hook. Dad? I sniffled. No. Dad didn't have anything, Judith. You know that. Just that old coat. I'm using it as a blanket because the heater here is broken. Nothing? She pressed. No papers? No accounts? Nothing, I cried. Just dust and moths. Why would he have money? He was a janitor, Judith. We're alone. I'm all alone. Well, Judith sighed, sounding relieved. Look, Clara, Richard isn't all bad. He told me he's willing to give you a small settlement. Just to help you get on your feet. But you have to be reasonable. You can't fight him. He is? I asked, feigning hope. Yes. But you have to sign the papers quickly. He stressed, Clara. Business is tough. If you drag this out, he might get angry and give you nothing. You know his temper. I know, I whispered. I'm scared, Judith. Don't be scared. Just sign. Where are you? I can bring the papers to you. No. I said quickly. No, I don't want you to see me like this. I'm a mess. I'll meet him. Tell him I'll meet him. Tomorrow. Okay, Judith said. I'll tell him. Smart choice, Clara. Really? It's for the best. Yeah, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. For the best. I hung up. I sat in my beautiful, leather armchair in my penthouse apartment, sipping a cup of expensive tea, and stared at the phone. she was working for him. My own flesh and blood was trying to trick me into signing away my rights for pennies, terrified that I might have found Dad's legacy. My phone buzzed again. A text from Judith, meeting set. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The Starbucks on 5th, don't be late. And Clara, try to look presentable. I threw the phone onto the couch. Presentable? Oh, I would be presentable. I walked into my walk-in closet. I had gone shopping yesterday with a personal shopper Patterson recommended. No more floral prints. No more pastels. I pulled out a pair of faded jeans and a slightly oversized gray sweater. I found a pair of cheap canvas sneakers. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted to see. The defeated, broken ex-wife. The woman who had nothing. Because the moment Richard signed those divorce papers, the moment the judge stamped them, the freedom clause would activate fully. And then, the janitor's daughter would become the landlord of his life. Get ready, Richard, I whispered to the empty room. The rent is due. The Starbucks on Fifth Avenue was crowded, buzzing with the sound of espresso machines and the frantic energy of the morning rush. I stood outside for a moment, catching my reflection in the glass. I looked exactly as I intended, defeated. My gray sweater was slightly oversized, my hair was pulled back in a messy, low ponytail, and I wore no makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a woman who had lost everything. Inside, sitting at a corner table, were Richard and Leslie. They looked like royalty visiting a soup kitchen. Richard was in a navy pinstripe suit, checking his watch impatiently. Leslie was wearing white, a risky choice for a coffee shop, but she wanted to show off that she didn't have to worry about spills. She was scrolling through her phone, looking bored. I took a deep breath, clutching my cheap canvas tote bag tighter, and walked in. You're late, Richard said as I approached the table. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer me a chair. I had to take the bus, I said softly, pulling out a wooden chair and sitting down. It was running behind schedule. Leslie snorted, not looking up from her screen. Maybe you should have left earlier. Time is money, Clara. Well, at least for us. I ignored her and looked at Richard. Judith said you wanted to help me. Richard sighed, leaning back and crossing his arms. Help is a strong word, Clara. I'm offering you a lifeline. My lawyers have drawn up a simplified divorce agreement. It's a clean break. He slid a thick envelope across the table. What does it say? I asked, keeping my hands in my lap. It says that you waive your right to any spousal support, any claim on Morton Developments, and any claim on the house, Richard said, his voice smooth and practiced. In exchange, I will give you a one-time cash payment of $10,000. $10,000? I whispered. Richard, the house alone is worth $3 million. We built that company together. You filed papers, Richard snapped, his patience fraying. You answered phones. You didn't build anything. I built it. And right now, frankly, the company is going through a restructuring. It's not worth what you think it is. He was lying. I knew he was lying. But he didn't know that I knew about the Skyline Towers debt crisis. I can't live on $10,000, I said, letting a tear slip down my cheek. I'm 52 years old. Who is going to hire me? That's not my problem, Leslie chimed in. She finally put her phone down and looked at me with cold, hard eyes. You had 25 years to make something of yourself, Clara. Instead, you just rode Richard's coattails. Take the money. Buy a cat. Move to Florida. Richard pulled a pen from his pocket. A Mont Blanc. I recognized it, I had bought it for him for our 10th anniversary. Sign the papers, Clara, he said. Or I walk away, and my lawyers will drag this out for 3 years. You'll be living under a bridge before you see a dime. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the papers. This was the moment. The freedom clause in Dad's trust required proof that I was severed from Richard. This document, this waiver of all claims, was exactly what Mr. Banks needed to unlock the $47 million. And more importantly, by signing this, Richard was legally stating that he wanted no part of my assets, present or future. He was signing away his claim to the Skyline Tower land without even knowing it. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll sign." Richard smiled. It was a predatory grin. "Smart girl." I took the pen. My hand shook, but not from fear. From anticipation. I signed my name on the dotted line. Clara Hartley Morton. "And this one," Richard said, flipping the page. "And here." I signed them all. Richard snatched the papers back the moment the ink was dry. He pulled a check from his jacket pocket and flicked it across the table like he was tipping a waitress. "There. 10 grand. Don't spend it all in one place." He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. Leslie stood up too, smoothing her white dress. "Goodbye, Clara," Richard said. "I hope you find, whatever it is simple people find." I stayed seated. I put my hand on the check. "Richard?" I said. He paused, looking back, annoyed. "What?" "Enjoy the view from your office," I said quietly. "The wind gets very cold at the top." He frowned, confused for a second, then shook his head. "You're delusional." He walked out, Leslie clicking behind him on her heels. I watched them go. Then, I picked up the cooling coffee Richard had left behind, took a sip, and smiled. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted. I pulled out my burner phone and texted Mr. Banks. "It's done. Unlock the funds." The transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened over the next 2 weeks, and it was the most satisfying fortnight of my life. First, I moved. I left the temporary condo and, using the anonymity of the trust, rented a sprawling penthouse 3 blocks away from the Skyline Tower. I wanted to be close. I wanted to look out my window and see his building. Next, Mr. Patterson went to work. We didn't buy a yacht. We didn't buy a private island. We went shopping for debt. Richard's company, Morton Developments, was bleeding. He had borrowed heavily to fund a new luxury resort in Mexico, a vanity project Leslie convinced him to start. The loans were massive, and they were held by a consortium of banks, with Westfield National holding the lion's share. Mr. Banks facilitated the sale. For $47 million, I didn't just become rich, I became the owner of Richard's financial soul. I sat in Mr. Patterson's office, watching the transaction complete on the screen. "Congratulations," Patterson said, handing me a file. "Hartley Holdings is now the primary creditor for Morton Developments. You hold $32 million of his commercial paper. What happens now?" I asked. "Now? We squeeze." Patterson grinned. "He's missed 2 interest payments. The banks were letting it slide because of his reputation. Hartley Holdings will not be so lenient." That afternoon, I sat in my new living room, surrounded by boxes of new clothes, silk, cashmere, structured blazers that screamed power, and waited for the fallout. I didn't have to wait long. My spy network, aka checking Richard's public social media and the business news, started lighting up. Rumor: Morton Development stock tumbles on debt fears. Leslie Vance posts angry selfie, why is it so hard to find good staff? Everyone is incompetent. But the real confirmation came from an unexpected source. I had kept my old email account active, the one Richard sometimes used to forward me bills he wanted me to pay. He must have forgotten to remove me from a group chain with his contractors. An email popped up, urgent, construction halted at Cabo site. Funding frozen by new creditor. Richard, we need answers. I sipped my tea. You want answers? I whispered to the screen. The answer is, you shouldn't have kicked your wife down the stairs. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Patterson sent formal notices to Richard's office demanding immediate payment of overdue interest or facing foreclosure. But the notices were signed only by Hartley Holdings' legal team. Richard had no idea who Hartley Holdings was. I heard from a mutual friend, one of the few who hadn't blocked me, that Richard was screaming at his staff, tearing apart his office looking for leaks. He thought it was a competitor. He thought it was a corporate raider from New York. He never once suspected the woman he thought was eating canned tuna in a Motel 6. But I wasn't done. The money was the trap. The land was the execution. The ground lease for the Skyline Tower was set to expire in 3 weeks. Dad's original contract stated that if the lease wasn't renewed 30 days prior to expiration, the ownership of all improvements, meaning the building itself, would revert to the landowner. Richard, in his arrogance, had ignored the renewal notices sent to his old address, the address of our home that he had kicked me out of. He assumed the land was owned by some faceless shell company that would just auto-renew. He was wrong. I sat with Patterson, drafting the notice of lease termination. "This is the nuclear option, Clara," Patterson warned me. "Once we send this, it's war. He will lose the building. His headquarters. His penthouses. Everything." I looked at the pen in my hand. The same hand that had scrubbed his floors, ironed his shirts, and held him when he cried about his mother. "He declared war when he gave my home to his mistress," I said. "I'm just finishing it." I signed the notice. The weak link in my chain was Judith. My sister. She was still texting me on my burner phone, asking how I was spending the $10,000, fishing for information. I knew she was reporting back to Richard. She was his eyes and ears, making sure I stayed pathetic and harmless. It was time to close that loop. I texted her back, "Judith, I'm in trouble. I need to see you. Please come to this address. Don't tell Richard." I gave her the address of my new penthouse. An hour later, the buzzer rang. I watched on the security camera as Judith walked into the lobby. She looked confused. This was one of the most exclusive buildings in the city. She probably thought I was working here as a maid. When she stepped off the elevator into my private foyer, her jaw dropped. I was waiting for her. I wasn't wearing the gray sweater anymore. I was wearing a tailored cream pantsuit, gold earrings, and my hair was styled in a sleek, sharp bob. "Clara," she gasped, clutching her purse. "What? Whose apartment is this? Are you cleaning here?" "Hello, Judith," I said calmly. "Come in. Take off your shoes. The rug is Persian." She walked into the living room, her eyes darting around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the view of the Skyline Tower. "I don't understand," she stammered. "You said you were broke. You took the 10 grand. Did you steal this?" "Sit down," I commanded. She sat. For the first time in her life, my bullying little sister looked small. "I didn't steal anything," I said, pouring myself a glass of water but not offering her one. "Dad left me something, Judith. Something Richard missed." "Money?" Her eyes lit up with that familiar greed. "Dad had money?" I knew it. "How much?" "We have to split it, Clara. I'm his daughter too." "You're his daughter," I agreed. "But you weren't the one who took care of him. And you certainly aren't the one he trusted." "I'll sue you," she hissed, her demeanor changing instantly from shock to aggression. "I'll tell Richard. He'll sue you. That money is marital property." "Actually," I smiled, "it's not. It's a trust. And Richard signed a waiver. Remember? You convinced me to sign it." Her face went pale. "But here's the thing, Judith," I continued, leaning forward. "I know you've been spying for him. I know he paid you $5,000 to get me to sign those papers." I didn't." "Don't lie. I have the bank records." I didn't, but I knew she was terrified of paper trails. But that's not the worst part. Remember when you worked as the bookkeeper for Richard's shell company 3 years ago? She froze. I was the one who balanced the books, Judith, I lied smoothly. I saw the discrepancies. The consulting fees paid to your personal account. Embezzlement is a felony. If Richard finds out you stole from him, well, he's already in a bad mood. What do you think he'll do? Judith started to shake. She knew Richard. She knew he would destroy her if he knew she had stolen from him. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to keep doing exactly what you're doing, I said. I want you to keep telling Richard that I'm broke. That I'm miserable. That I'm living in a studio apartment in the slums. You want me to lie to him? I want you to be my mole, I said. You tell me everything he's doing. Every move he makes. Every panic attack he has. And in exchange, I won't send the IRS the file on your embezzlement. Judith looked at me with fear, and then, surprisingly, a hint of respect. She had always despised me because she thought I was weak. Now that I held the knife, she finally saw me. He's planning a gala, she said quickly, her voice low. Next Friday. At the Skyline Tower. He's trying to woo new investors from Dubai. He says it's his last chance to save the company. A gala, I mused. Is Leslie going? Yes. She's ordered a dress from Paris. She's acting like she owns the place. Perfect, I said. Get me an invitation. I can't, security is tight. You're his sister-in-law. You're on the list. Just add a +1 for a potential investor. Name him. Mr. Banks. Okay, Judith said, standing up. I'll do it. But Clara, are you going to destroy him? I walked to the window and looked out at the Skyline Tower, gleaming in the twilight. I'm not going to destroy him, Judith. I'm just going to introduce him to reality. The night of the gala, the Skyline Tower was lit up like a Christmas tree. Limousines lined the block. The paparazzi were out in full force, flashing bulbs at the city's elite as they walked the red carpet. Richard had gone all out. He needed money, so he spent money to look like he had money. It was the oldest con in the book. I arrived not in a limo, but in a sleek black town car. I stepped out. I wasn't Clara the housewife. I was Clara the landlord. I wore a midnight blue velvet gown that hugged every curve I used to hide. It had a high slit up the leg and an off-the-shoulder neckline. I wore diamonds, real ones, that sparkled under the camera flashes. My hair was swept up, exposing my neck. Beside me walked Mr. Patterson in a tuxedo, looking dangerous, and Mr. Banks, who looked like the cat who had eaten the canary. We walked past the security checkpoint. The guard checked the list. Mr. Banks plus guests. Go right ahead. We took the private elevator to the penthouse ballroom. The doors opened, and the noise of the party hit us, jazz music, clinking glasses, laughter. The room was filled with the city's power players. In the center of it all was Richard, holding a microphone, with Leslie clinging to his arm in a silver dress that looked like tin foil. And that is why Morton Developments is the future of the city. Richard boomed. We are building legacies. The crowd applauded politely. I stepped into the room. It started as a ripple. People near the door turned to look. Then the whispering started. Who is that? Is that Clara? The crowd parted. I walked straight down the center of the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Mr. Patterson and Mr. Banks flanked me like bodyguards. Richard saw me. He stopped mid-sentence. The microphone dropped to his side. His face went from flushed confidence to ash gray. Leslie squinted, then her eyes went wide. She whispered something frantically to Richard. I stopped 10 feet away from them. The music died down. The room went silent. Clara? Richard said into the microphone, his voice amplified and shaky. what are you doing here? This is a private event. Security. Cancel security, Richard, Mr. Patterson boomed, his voice projecting without a mic. We have every right to be here. Who are you? Richard demanded. I'm Silas Patterson, legal counsel for Hartley Holdings. A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone had heard of the mysterious Hartley Holdings that had been buying up debt. And, Patterson continued, gesturing to me, I am here with the sole owner of Hartley Holdings. Mrs. Clara Hartley. Richard laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. Clara? She's broke. She's living in a motel. This is a joke. It's not a joke, Richard, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and clear. And neither is the eviction notice. Eviction? Richard spluttered. What are you talking about? Mr. Banks stepped forward, holding a document. Mr. Morton, as the trustee for the land upon which this tower sits, I am here to inform you that your ground lease expired 3 days ago. You failed to renew. That's impossible, Richard snarled. We own the building. You own the bricks and the glass, Patterson corrected. But Mrs. Hartley owns the dirt. And under the terms of the original contract signed by George Hartley and the developers, since you failed to renew, the ownership of all structures on the land reverts to the landowner. The room gasped. I saw the investors from Dubai exchanging worried glances. You're lying, Leslie shrieked, stepping forward. She's a nobody. She's a housewife. I looked at Leslie. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names. I just smiled. And you, I said, are trespassing in my building. Get out. Richard, do something. Leslie screamed. Richard looked at me. He looked at the investors. He looked at the room full of people witnessing his humiliation. You planned this, he whispered. The debt. The silence. It was you. Yes, I said. I learned from the best, Richard. You taught me that business is war. Well. I just dropped the bomb. I'll sue you. Richard roared, his face turning purple. I'll sue you for every penny. This is fraud. This is entrapment. Actually, Patterson interrupted, checking his watch. You might have a hard time filing a lawsuit. Because looking at the time, the police should be arriving right about now. As if on cue, the elevator doors pinged open. 4 uniformed officers and 2 detectives in suits walked in. Richard Morton, the lead detective asked. Richard stumbled back, knocking over a champagne tower. Crash. Glass shattered everywhere. Yes? We have a warrant for your arrest. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Even the jazz band had stopped playing. Arrest? Richard stammered, his hands held up in surrender, though he looked like he wanted to run. For what? This is a misunderstanding. This is a civil dispute. Not this part, the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. We're arresting you for bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Forgery? Leslie gasped, stepping away from him. Yes, the detective continued, walking toward Richard. We received evidence that you falsified loan documents to the Bank of Mexico, using non-existent assets as collateral. Specifically, you listed the Skyline Tower land as an asset you owned. Which, as we now know, you do not. It was the final nail. Richard had been so desperate for the loan for his Cabo resort that he had lied on the application. He claimed he owned the land outright. That was federal bank fraud. Clara, Richard pleaded, looking at me with wild, terrified eyes. Clara, tell them. Tell them we're partners. Tell them it was a mistake. Please. I'm your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected. And I don't partner with criminals. The officer grabbed Richard's wrists and spun him around. Click. Click. The sound of the handcuffs locking was the sweetest music I had ever heard. You can't do this to me. Richard screamed as they began to drag him toward the elevators. I am Richard Morton. I built this city. Leslie. Call the lawyers. Leslie. He looked around for his mistress. Leslie was gone. I scanned the room and saw the back of her silver dress disappearing into the kitchen exit. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship. As Richard was shoved into the elevator, still shouting threats and pleas, the room turned to me. These were the people who had ignored me for years. The wives who hadn't invited me to lunch. The businessmen who looked through me. Now, they looked at me with fear and respect. Mrs. Hartley, one of the investors, stepped forward, a man I recognized as a billionaire from tech. I had no idea about the situation. If there is anything we can do to stabilize the transition, we can discuss it on Monday, I said coolly. Right now, I'd like everyone to leave. I have a building to inspect. Within 10 minutes, the ballroom was empty. Just me, Patterson, Banks, and the waitstaff who were quietly cleaning up the broken glass. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out at the city lights. I was standing in the penthouse of the tallest building in the city, on land my father had bought with his meager savings, wearing a dress bought with his love. We did it, George, Mr. Banks whispered, standing beside me. We really did it. Not yet, I said, watching a police car's lights flash down on the street below. He's going to fight. He has one card left. What card? Patterson asked. He's going to claim he didn't know, I said. He's going to claim the forgery wasn't him. He needs a scapegoat. I was right. Richard didn't go down quietly. He made bail the next morning, probably using the last of his hidden cash. And immediately, the press spin began. Tycoon claim set up by vengeful ex-wife. Richard Morton, I am innocent of fraud. He held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. He looked haggard, but defiant. He claimed that his financial advisors had prepared the documents and he had signed them without reading, trusting his team. And who did he blame? Leslie Vance. He threw her under the bus so fast it made my head spin. He claimed Leslie, as his chief branding officer, had pressured the finance department to inflate numbers to secure the resort funding because it was her pet project. It was a desperate move. And it was a mistake. That night, my burner phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? He blamed me. It was Leslie. Her voice sounded wrecked. She was crying, or maybe she was drunk. Probably both. I saw the news, I said. I did everything for him, Leslie sobbed. I lied for him. I helped him hide the accounts from you. I even picked out that damn dress he bought you for your anniversary because he couldn't be bothered. And now he says I'm the fraudster? He uses people, Leslie, I said. You were just the next one in line. I tried to warn you. I have files, she whispered. My grip on the phone tightened. What kind of files? Emails. Voice memos. He recorded everything, Clara. He was paranoid. He has recordings of him telling me to change the numbers on the loan application. He has recordings of him practicing how to forge your father's signature on an old addendum he tried to create last week to save the lease. He tried to forge Dad's signature? Yes. He was going to present it in court. Saying your dad extended the lease to 99 years before he died. Leslie, I said, my voice urgent. Where are those files? I made a copy, she said. I'm not going to jail for him. If I give them to you, will you help me? I thought about it. I hated her. She had walked into my house and laughed at my pain. She had worn my clothes. But hate is a heavy burden, and I needed ammunition more than I needed revenge on a girl who was just as manipulated as I was. Bring me the files, I said. And I'll ask my lawyer to speak to the DA about a plea deal for you. Immunity for testimony. Okay, she sniffled. I'll meet you. But Clara? What? You were right. The wind is really cold up here. The trial of the People versus Richard Morton, and the civil suit Hartley Holdings versus Morton, was the event of the year. The courtroom was packed. Richard sat at the defense table, looking diminished. He had lost weight. His expensive tan had faded to a sickly yellow. He wouldn't look at me. I sat in the front row, right behind the prosecutor. Richard's defense strategy was simple: deny, blame the women. He claimed I was a bitter ex-wife framing him, and Leslie was an incompetent employee who acted alone. His lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Finch, was doing a decent job of creating doubt. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Finch said. "Mr. Morton is a builder. A visionary. He doesn't look at the fine print. He trusted his team. Is it a crime to trust?" Then, it was our turn. The prosecutor stood up. "The state calls Leslie Vance to the stand." A murmur went through the room. Richard's head snapped up. He looked at Leslie as she walked to the witness box. She looked modest, wearing a simple black suit, no makeup. She looked young and scared. "Ms. Vance," the prosecutor asked, "did Richard Morton know about the falsified land ownership on the loan application?" "Yes," Leslie said, her voice clear. "Objection. Hearsay." Finch shouted. "I have proof," Leslie said. "I have audio recordings." The judge nodded. "Play the tape." The courtroom fell silent as a recording played over the speakers. It was unmistakably Richard's voice. Arrogant, dismissive. Richard's voice: "Just change the line item, Leslie. Put fee simple ownership for the land. The Mexicans won't check the county clerk records in Ohio. We need that money by Friday." Leslie's voice: "But Richard, that's fraud. If the bank finds out." Richard's voice: "I am the bank. Just do it. And if anyone asks, we'll say it was a clerical error. Stop whining and look pretty." Richard put his head in his hands. The jury looked at him with disgust. But we weren't done. "And Ms. Vance," the prosecutor continued, "do you have knowledge of any other forgeries?" "Yes," she said. Richard knew the ground lease was expiring. He tried to forge an addendum using a signature from an old letter George Hartley wrote. He practiced it for hours. Here is the video. A video played on the screens. It was shaky, taken from a cell phone peeking through a door crack. It showed Richard sitting at his desk, holding a light box, tracing a signature over and over again, cursing when he got it wrong. Richard on video: "Stupid old janitor. Even dead, he's a pain in my ass." That was it. The gasps in the courtroom were audible. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mr. Banks. He was crying silent tears. "He called him a stupid janitor," Banks whispered. "George was 10 times the man he is." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they came back, the foreman stood up. I held my breath. "In the matter of the People versus Richard Morton, on the charge of bank fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty." Judge Coleman banged his gavel. "Sentencing will be set for next month. Bail is revoked due to flight risk. Remand the defendant into custody." 2 bailiffs moved in. Richard stood up, panic in his eyes. He looked around the room, frantic, until his eyes locked on mine. "Clara," he shouted as they grabbed his arms. "Clara, please. I'm sorry. We can fix this. I still love you." I stood up. I walked to the railing. "You don't love me, Richard," I said, loud enough for him to hear over the chaos. "You love my money. And now, you have neither." They dragged him out the side door. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, sealing his fate. I turned to Mr. Patterson. Is it over? The criminal case? Yes, Patterson smiled. Now comes the civil forfeiture. We're going to take everything else. The dismantling of Richard's empire was swift. With him in prison awaiting sentencing, he eventually got 12 years, his assets were liquidated to pay his debts. I bought the Skyline Tower outright at the bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar. No one else wanted to touch it with the legal mess attached. I evicted the remnants of Morton Developments. I walked through the empty penthouse offices, looking at the mahogany desk where Richard used to sit and ignore me. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a quiet sense of closure. I hired a crew to strip the place. We removed the pretentious art, the gold fixtures, the ego. As for the others, Leslie got probation in exchange for her testimony. She moved back to her hometown in Nebraska. Last I heard, she was working in a bakery and taking night classes in ethics. I sent her a small check, enough to pay for her first semester. Not because I forgave her, but because Dad would have wanted me to be kind. Judith, that was harder. She came to see me a week after the trial. She sat in my living room, looking nervous. So, she said. You won. You have everything. I have what belongs to me, I said. Are you going to turn me in? She asked, her voice trembling. For the embezzlement? I looked at my sister. She was petty, greedy, and weak. But she was also family. And she had helped me, in the end. No, I said. But we are done, Judith. I'm setting up a small monthly stipend for you, enough so you don't starve, but not enough to live in luxury. You need to get a job. You need to earn your own way. A job, she scoffed. Doing what? Maybe you can learn to clean, I said, handing her a card for a housekeeping service. It's honest work. Dad did it for 40 years. She looked at the card, then at me. She didn't argue. She just nodded, stood up, and walked out. We haven't spoken much since, but I hear she's working at a hotel downtown. Dad would be proud she's finally sweating for $1. On a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after the trial, I drove out to the old city cemetery. I parked my car, a sensible Volvo, not a limo, and walked up the hill to the modest section where the workers were buried. Dad's grave was simple. A gray granite stone. George Hartley. Beloved father. An honest man. I knelt down in the grass, ignoring the dampness seeping into my jeans. I placed a bouquet of yellow roses, his favorite, against the stone. Then, I placed something else. The old, black bank card. Here you go, Dad, I whispered. I don't need it anymore. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree above me. It sounded like a sigh. I wish you were here, I said, tracing his name with my finger. I wish you could see what we did. We took down the shark, Dad. Just like you said. I sat there for a long time, telling him everything. I told him about the foundation I had started, the George Hartley Initiative. We're helping women, Dad, I told the stone. Women who get left behind. We pay for their lawyers. We help them find housing. We teach them financial literacy so no man can ever control them again. I told him about the Skyline Tower. I had renamed it the Hartley Building. I had turned the bottom 10 floors into affordable housing for service workers, janitors, maids, cooks, people who worked in the city but couldn't afford to live in it. The rent is based on income, I smiled. And the maintenance is impeccable. The toilets always flush. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't the sun. It was him. I knew, in that way you just know things, that he was smiling. He hadn't saved that money for me to buy yachts. He saved it so I could change the world, starting with my own. You were right, I said, standing up and brushing the dirt off my knees. Freedom isn't about the money. It's about the choice. And I choose to be your daughter. It's been a year now. I'm sitting in my office at the foundation. My team is buzzing around me, smart, passionate women who are fighting the good fight. I have a date tonight. His name is David. He's a retired history teacher. He drives a Honda, wears corduroy jackets, and he has no idea exactly how much money I have. He just knows I run a nonprofit. He likes me because I laugh at his jokes and I make a mean lasagna. It's nice. It's real. I looked at my reflection in the window. The tired, scared woman who stood in that Starbucks in a baggy sweater is gone. In her place is Clara. Just Clara. I've learned a lot in this journey. I learned that people will treat you exactly how you let them treat you. I learned that revenge is a dish best served legally. But mostly, I learned that the people who love you, the real people, don't care about your bank account. They care about your heart. Richard is in a cell, probably blaming the world for his bad luck. I don't think about him much. He's just a ghost from a past life. But I think about Dad every day. To everyone listening to my story, if you feel like you're drowning, if you feel like you've been kicked down the stairs and locked out in the rain, check your pockets. Check your soul. You have something valuable in there. Maybe it's not a secret trust fund. Maybe it's your grit. Maybe it's your kindness. Maybe it's just the stubborn refusal to give up. Whatever it is, use it. Don't let the sharks eat you. Become the ocean. I'm Clara Morton. I was a janitor's daughter. Now, I'm the landlord of my own destiny. And let me tell you, the view from here is spectacular.